हेलो एवरीवन, वेलकम टू माय यूट्यूब चैनल द सोलफुल डायरी। आज के वीडियो में हम बात करेंगे टीएस एलियट की पोम द वेस्टलैंड के बारे में। पोएट के बारे में हम पहले ही डिस्कस कर चुके हैं, जिसका लिंक डिस्क्रिप्शन में है। यह पोम 5 सेक्शंस में डिवाइडेड है, तो हम इस वीडियो को 2 पार्ट्स में बनाएंगे। पहले सेक्शन में हम सेक्शन 1, 2 और 3 के बारे में बात करेंगे आज के वीडियो में, और सेक्शन 4 और 5 पोएटिक डिवाइसेस और थीम्स के बारे में हम अगले वीडियो में बात करेंगे। पोम को इन डेप्थ जानने से पहले जान लेते हैं उसके कुछ की फीचर्स। द मेन थीम ऑफ द पोम इज टू सर्च फॉर मीनिंग amidst the fragmented post-war modern world. It is a dramatic monologue. Emotions evoked through the poem are anxiety, hope, hopelessness. It is a modern piece of work. The poem draws allusions from everything, from the Fisher King to Buddhism. The Wasteland was published in 1922 and remains one of the most important modernist texts. It is considered as a defining poem of literary modernism, as it employs experimentation and form while portraying the decadent contemporaneous time instead of the Victorian idealism. The poem has such vast and complex references that Eliot had to provide endnotes to the poem. Some of the mythology used within the poem include the Hindu Upanishads, Buddhist lore, and Arthurian legend woven throughout the narrative, bringing forth several different voices. The poem itself is about culture, the celebration of culture, the death of culture, and the mystery of being learned in a world that has largely forgotten its roots. The main advantage of this poem is that it embodies so much knowledge within the poem itself. The poem serves as a living testimony to the human spirit and human culture. The poem is divided into 5 sections, each of which has a different theme at the center of its writing, as well as addendums to the poem itself, which were published largely at the behest of the publisher himself, who wanted some reason to justify printing The Wasteland as a separate poem in its own book. The poem was preceded by Latin epigraphy from the Satyricon, a Latin fiction written by Gaius Petronus in the late 1st century AD about a narrator, Encolopsius, and his hapless and unfaithful lover. The phrase reads in English, "I saw with my own eyes the Sibyl of Cumae hanging in a jar, and when the boy said to her, 'Sibyl, what do you want?' she replied, 'I want to die.'" It is not a great way to start the poem. The oracle Sibyl is granted immortality by Apollo, but not eternal youth or health, and so she grows older and frailer and never dies. The meaninglessness of the oracle of Sibyl's life is a testimony and an allusion to the meaninglessness of culture, according to Eliot. By putting that particular quotation from the Satyricon, the poet encapsulates the very sense of the wasteland. Culture has become meaningless and dragged on for nothing. After this quote, there is a dedication to Ezra Pound, Il Miglior Fabbro. Originally, The Wasteland was supposed to be twice as long as it was. Pound took it and edited it down to the version that was later published. However, Il Miglior Fabbro can also be considered to be an allusion to Dante's Purgatorio. The best myth writes Dante about troubadour Arnaud Daniel, as well as Pound's own The Spirit of Romance, a book of literary criticism where the second chapter is Il Miglior Fabbro, translated as the better craftsman. Although originally written in ink, later versions of the poem included a dedication to Pound as a part of the poem's publication. Section 1, The Burial of the Dead, Stanza 1. April is the cruelest month, breeding lilacs out of the dead land, mixing memory and desire, stirring tall roots with spring rain. Winter kept us warm, covering earth in forgetful snow, feeding a little life with dried tubers. Summer surprised us, coming over the Starnbergeries with a shower of rain. We stopped in the colonnade and went on in sunlight into the Hof garden and drank coffee and talked for an hour. Ben Garkane, Rosenstam, or Lithuan etched Dutch. And when we were children staying at the Archduke's, my cousin, he took me out on a sled and I was frightened. He said, Mary, Mary, hold on tight. And down we went. In the mountains, there you feel free. I read much of the night and go south in the winter. The poem begins with a recurring image of death. April is the cruelest month, breathing lilacs out of the dead land, mixing memory and desire, stirring dull roots with spring red. Note the cadence of every ink ending to the sentence, giving it a breathless, uneven sort of reading when one reads it out. There is a quick, slow pace to it that invites the reader to linger over words. The use of the word winter provides an oxymoronic idea, the idea that cold and death can somehow be warming. However, it isn't the celebration of death as it would be in other poems of the time, but a cold, hard fact. Winter is the time for normal life to hibernate, to become suspended, and thus the anxiety of change and of new life is avoided. At the time of writing, Eliot was suffering from an acute state of nerves, and it could well be truth behind the poem that change was something he was actively avoiding. Starnbergeries and its shower of regenerating rain refers to countless Mary Louise Larrett's native home of Munich. The reference to Hofgarten also calls back to Munich. It is a garden in the center of Munich located between the residence and the Englischer Garden, and she stands as a symbolic reference to old European values. Mary Louise Larrett's presence in the poem can be put down for quite a few reasons. After the crushing misery of the First World War, Mary Louise Larish was a symbol of old war Europe, the kind from before the war. The two experiences recounted here would also be well seen as the dualistic nature of the world. Before the war, Mary and her cousin were sledding, exuding a sense of excitement and adventure in the mountains. There you feel free, and then the reference to drank coffee and talked for an hour, which could stand for the post war world, boring and sterile and emptied of all meaning and values. Unlike the pre war world, the separation of the two stanzas by the German language further emphasizes the idea that while both are alike, the two worlds remain different from each other. Bingar, Kane, Rosenstam, Os Lithuan, etched Dits means I'm not Russian at all. I'm come from Lithuania. I'm a real German. This phrase further emphasizes the separation that the reader might also be feeling due to the disruption caused by a different language. Stanza 2. What are the roots that clutch? What branches grow out of the stony rubbish? Son of man, you cannot say or guess, for you know only a heap of broken images where the sun beats, and the dead tree gives no shelter, the cricket no relief, and the dry stone no sound of water, only there is shadow under this red rock. Come in under the shadow of this red rock, and it will show you something different from either. Your shadow at morning striding behind you, or your shadow at evening rising to meet you. I will show you fear is a handful of dust. Frisch, wet, der Wind, der Heimat zu. Min ich kind. Wow, willest du? You gave me hyacinths first a year ago. They called me the hyacinth girl. Yet, when we came back, late from the hyacinth garden, your arms full and your hairs wet, I could not speak and my eyes failed. I was neither living nor dead, and I knew nothing. Looking into the heart of light, the silence, or turned Laird's mirror. The poet again uses an illusion, son of man. You cannot say or guess, which is directly lifted from the call of Ezekiel in the book of Ezekiel. The religious illusion could be considered a response to the vast technological advancements of the time, where science was taking great leaps. However, the spiritual and cultural sectors of the world were desolate. A heap of broken images shows the fragmented nature of the world and the snapshots of what the world has become to further pinpoint the emptiness of a world without pillars of culture and religion, a world without meaning and spiritual belief. Eliot himself noted that this is from Ecclesiastes 12, a book within the Bible that discusses the meaning of life and the duty of man to appreciate his life. The references to shadows seem to imply that there is something larger and far greater than the reader sulking along beside the poem, lending it an air of menace and the narrator an air of omnipotence, of being everywhere at once. The German in the middle is from Tristan and Isolde, and it concerns the nature of love. Love, like life, is something given by God, and humankind should appreciate it because it is very easily disappears. In Tristan and Isolde, the main idea behind the opera is that while death conquers all and unites grieving lovers, love itself only causes problems in the first place, and therefore it is death that should be celebrated and not love. The use of it in Eliot's poem adds the idea of a welcome death, of death needing to appear. Another reference to tragic love and uniting death occurs in the use of the flower hyacinth. Hyacinth was a young Spartan prince who caught the eye of Apollo, and in a tragic accident, Apollo killed him with his disc. Mourning his lover, Apollo turned the drops of blood into flowers, and thus was born the flower hyacinth. There are twofold reasons for the reference to hyacinth. One, the legend itself is a miserable legend of death, once more uniting thwarted lovers, and two, the illusion of homosexuality would have itself been problematic. Homosexuality was not tolerated at the time of Eliot's writing, so he could be attempting to give the silent a voice by referencing Hyacinth, one of the most obvious homosexual Greek myths. However, to continue with the same theme in the poem, the evidence of love will be lost to death and there will be nothing more existing. Additionally, the allusions to death also conveys the idea of regeneration or rebirth in another form, which happens after death, as evident in the case of Spartan prince whose death led to the birth of a flower hyacinth. The stanza ends with another quote from Tristan Isolde, this time meaning empty and desolate sea. Stanza 3. Madame Sosostris, famous clairvoyant, had a bad cold, nevertheless, is known to be the wisest woman in Europe. With a wicked pack of cards, here said she, is your card the drowned Phoenician sailor? Those are pearls that were his eyes. Look, here is Belladonna, the lady of the rocks, the lady of situations. Here is the man with three staves, and here the wheel, and here is the one eyed merchant, and this card, which is blank, is something he carries on his back, which I am forbidden to see. I do not find the hanged man. Fear death by water. I see crowds of people walking round in a ring. Thank you. If you see dear Mrs. Equitone, tell her I bring the horoscope myself. One must be so careful these days. Kenneth Brooks writes the fortune telling of the burial of the dead will illustrate the general method very satisfactorily. On the surface of the poem, the poet reproduces the patter of the charlatan, Madame Sosostris, and there is the surface irony, the contrast between the original use of the tarot cards and the use made by Madame Sosostris. But each of the details justified realistically in the palaver of the fortune teller assumes a new meaning in the general context of the poem. There is then, in addition to the surface irony, something of a Sophoclean irony too, and the fortune telling, which is taken ironically by a 20th century audience, becomes true as the poem develops. True in a sense in which Madame Sosostris herself does not think it true. The surface irony is thus reversed and becomes an irony on a deeper level. The items of her speech have only one reference in terms of the context of her speech: the man with three staves and the one eyed merchant, the crowds of people walking round in a ring, etc. But transferred to other contexts, they become loaded with special meanings. To sum up all the central symbols of the poem, head up here, but here is the only section in which they are explicitly bound together. The binding is slight and accidental. The deeper lines of association only emerge in terms of the total context as the poem develops, and this is, of course, exactly the effect which the poet intends. The Phoenician sailor could be a reference to Shakespeare's The Tempest. In this particular stanza, several images intermesh between water and rock, starting with the allusion to the tempest, water being the symbol used by Eliot for rejuvenation and regeneration, and then moving on to the idea of Belladonna, the Lady of the Rocks, that is, the never changing and desolate landscape of the wasteland itself. Once more, it moves to water, the man with three staves being the representation of the Fisher King, who was wounded by his own spear and is regenerated through water given to him from the Holy Grail. Stanza 4. Unreal city. Under the brown fog of a winter dawn, a crowd flowed over London Bridge. So many. I had not thought death had undone so many. Sighs short and infrequent were exhaled, and each man fixed his eye before his feet. Float up the hill and down King William Street, to where St. Mary Woolnoth kept the hours with a dead sound on the final stroke of 9. There I saw one I knew and stopped him, crying, Stetson, you who were with me in the ships at Miley, that corpse you planted last year in your garden, has it begun to sprout? Will it bloom this year? Or has the sudden frost disturbed its bed? Oh, keep the dog far hence, that's friend to men. Oh, or with his nails he will dig it up again. You hypocrite lecturer, mon semblable, mon frere. Unreal City refers to Baudelaire's The Seven Old Men from Fleurs du Mal. It was written at the time when Paris was considered a decadent, overwrought paradise of science, technology, and innovation, but not very much culture. Thus, Paris in Baudelaire's writing takes on a nightmarish landscape. Here, Eliot uses it in much the same effect, a nightmarish landscape that is not quite Paris and is not quite London, but is meant to stand in for several places at once. Mile is a symbol of warfare. It was a naval battle between the Romans and Carthage, and Eliot uses it here as a stand in for the First World War to show that humanity has never changed, that war will never change, and death itself will never change. Oh, keep the dog far hence, that's friend to men, is a paraphrasing of a quote from John Webster's The White Devil, a play about the Victoria Acromobony murder. In the play, a character named Marcello is murdered, and his mother tearfully implores Flaminio to keep the wolf far hence, that's foe to men, for with his nails he will dig them up again. If he is dug up again, then his spirit will never find rest, and he will never be reborn. Here, Eliot, capitalizing on the quote, changes it so that the attempt to disturb rebirth is seen as a good thing. After all, Eliot is implying would want to be reborn in a world without culture. Section 2. A Game of Chess, Stanza 1. The chair she sat in, like a burnished throne, glowed on the marble, where the glass, held up by standards wrought with fluted vines, from which a golden cupidon peeped out, Another hid his eyes behind his wing, doubled the flames of 7-branched candelabra, reflecting light upon the table as the glitter of her jewels rose to meet it. From satin cases poured in rich profusion, in vials of ivory and colored glass, unstoppered lurked her strange synthetic perfumes, unguent, powdered, or liquid, troubled, confused, and drowned the scents and odors stirred by the air that freshened from the window. These ascended in flattening the prolonged candle flames, flung their smoke into the laquaria, stirring the pattern on the coffered ceiling. Hued sea wood, fed with copper, burned green and orange, framed by the colored stone, in which sat like a carved dolphin swarm. Above the antique mantel was displayed, as though a window gave upon the sylvan scene, the change of Philomel by the barbarous king so rudely forced. Yet there the nightingale filled all the desert with enviable voices, and still she cried, and still the world pursues. Juk juk to dirty ears, another withered stump of time, foretold upon the walls. Staring forms leaned out, leaning, hushing the room enclosed. Footsteps shuffled on the stair. Under the firelight, under the brush, her hair, spread out in fairy points, glowed into words, then would be savagely still. The second part moves on from the description of the landscape, the titular wasteland, to 3 different settings and 3 more different characters. The title is taken from 2 plays by Thomas Middleton, wherein the idea of a game of chess is an exercise in seduction. Decadence and pre-war luxury abound in the first part of the stanza. The references to throne could be attempting to pinpoint to Europe or England, more specifically, but even without the remits of place. The idea is of pre-war Europe, the seductive and vicious old war that American writers harped on about in their works. However, the luxury that is written about seems empty. The golden Cupidon hides his face, and the reference to jewels, ivory, and glass seems to show an empty wealth. Everything that is mentioned in the poem is a symbol of extravagance. However, the fact that it is glass and ivory and jewels seems to suggest a certain fragility in its wealth. Even the colors seem muted, and the light seems to be fading throughout the first stanza, shedding light only for a moment. As we read, the extravagance seems to be withering. Laquaria is a type of paneling. The reference to paradise lost, Sylvan scene, the change of Philomel by the barbarous king, can allude to everything that the world has lost since the First World War. Innocent soldiers, innocence in general, the sense of nothing ever quite being right again. It can also stand for the violent death of culture, given away to the vapidity of the modern world. There is a sense of altogether failure in this section. Stanza 2. My nerves are bad tonight. Yes, bad, stay with me. Speak to me. Why do you never speak? Speak. What are you thinking of? What thinking? What? I never know what you are thinking. Think. Here we see the insanity of the woman, thereby symbolizing that all her wealth has not done a thing for her mind, lending the fragmented poem an even bigger sense of fragmentation and giving it a sense of loss. True, the reader does not yet know what we have lost. As this was written at the height of spiritualism, one could imagine that it is trying to draw an allusion to those grief-maddened mothers and mistresses and lovers who contacted spiritualists and mediums to try and come into contact with their loved ones. Alternatively, one can take it as the embodiment of England, trying to reach out to her dead. Stanza 3. I think we are in Rat's Alley, where the dead men lost their bones. What is that noise? The wind under the door. What is that noise now? What is the wind doing? Nothing again, nothing. Do you know nothing? Do you see nothing? Do you remember nothing? I remember. Those are pearls that were his eyes. Are you alive or not? Is there nothing in your head? But the Shakespearean rag. It's so elegant, so intelligent. What shall I do now? What shall I do? I shall rush out as I am and walk the street with my hair down. So, what shall we do tomorrow? What shall we ever do? The hot water at 10, and if it rains, a closed car at 4, and we shall play a game of chess, pressing lidless eyes and waiting for a knock upon the door. I think we are in Rat's Alley, where the dead men lost their bone, is a reference to the First World War again. The trenches were notorious for rats, and the use of this imagery further lends the poem a sense of decay and rot. The stanza causes further fragmentation of the poem, to the point where even the grammar seems to be suffering. Shakespearean rag was a renaming of the mysterious rag, and it is furthermore emphasizing the death of culture for popular high society dances and popular culture in general. However, it is interesting to note that the poem mentions Shakespeare again. Once more the reader thinks of The Tempest, a play set on a little island beset by ferocious storms. The lack of purpose and lack of guidance can be considered to be one of the causes of madness and further descent into fragmentation in the poem. There is a loose sense of time in this particular stanza. From the hot water at 10, and if it rains, a closed car at 4, and we shall play a game of chess, pressing lidless eyes and waiting for a knock upon the door. It lends the poem a sense of suspended animation, as it did in the beginning. However, here the guideless manners of the people seems to be loosely defined by very small happenings. Their days are structured through movements rather than planned out. Stanza 4. When little husband get demobbed, I said, I didn't mince my words. I said to her myself, hurry up, please, it's time. Now Albert's coming back. Make yourself a bit smart. He will want to know what you've done with that money he gave you to get yourself some teeth. He did. I was there. You have them all out, Lil, and get a nice set. He said, I swear, I can't bear to look at you, and no more, can't I? I said, and think of poor Albert. He has been in the army 4 years. He wants a good time. And if you don't give it him, there's others, I said. Oh, is there? She said. Something over that, I said. Then I will know who to thank, she said, and give me a straight look. Hurry up, please, it's time. If you don't like it, you can get on with it, I said. Others can pick and choose if you don't. But if Albert makes off, it won't be for lack of telling. You ought to be ashamed, I said, to look so antique. And her only 31. I can't help it, she said, pulling a long face. It's them pills I took to bring it off, she said. She's had 5 already and nearly died of young George. The chemist said it would be all right, but I have never been the same. You're a proper fool, I said. Well, if Albert won't leave you alone, then it is, I said. What you get married for if you don't want children? Hurry up, please, it's time. Well, that Sunday Albert was home. They had a hot gammon, and they asked me into dinner to get the beauty of it hot. Hurry up, please, it's time. Hurry up, please, it's time. Good night, Bill. Good night, Lau. Good night, May. Good night, Tara. Good night, good night. Good night, ladies. Good night, sweet ladies. Good night, good night. Lil could be a reference to Lilith, Adam's first wife, who was thrown out of Eden for being too dominant. However, in the poem, it could also be considered that Lil is merely a friend of the narrator's, a woman who was unfaithful to her husband. Here again is reference the cloying and ultimately useless nature of love. And if you don't give it to him, there's others will, I said. This seems to be built upon the idea of sex as the ultimate expression of manliness, a theme that Eliot enjoyed exploring in his works. The fact that woman hints that there are others who will implies that she herself is sleeping with her friend's husband. However, we cannot be certain of this. This last part of the stanza seems to show the minutiae of the upper class in showy lightning, with a hard emphasis on the nature of womanhood and on the trials of womanhood. Lil is only 31, but looks much older. She took pills to bring it off, which we later understand is to induce abortions, and throughout the poem, the other woman attempts to give her advice. However, the irony is that the other woman is as well miserable and wrapped up in her own misery to the point where her advice seems to be little skewed. Peppered throughout the latter stanza of the poem is the phrase, "Hurry up, please, it's time," giving a sense of urgency to the poem that is at odds with the lackadaisical way that the woman is recounting her stories. It seems to be building up to an almost apocalyptic event, a dark tragedy that she is completely unaware of. The last line references Ophelia, the drowned lover of Hamlet, who famously thought a woman's love is brief. Therefore, we know for sure that this particular stanza of the poem is referencing sex, the ultimate pleasure for a man and the duty of a woman. Additionally, the poem alludes to the loveless, infertile, and sterile sexual relationships of the decayed modern world. The debased sexual relationships indicate the lack of genuine human connections, emphasizing the meaninglessness and spiritual desolation of the post-war world. Section 3. The Fire Sermon. Stanza 1. The river's tent is broken. The last fingers of leaf clutch and sink into the wet bank. The wind crosses the brown land unheard. The nymphs are departed. Sweet themes run softly till I end my song. The river bears no empty bottles, sandwich papers, silk handkerchiefs, cardboard boxes, cigarette ends, or other testimony of summer nights. The nymphs are departed, and their friends, the loitering hires of city directors, departed, have left no address. By the water of Leman, I sat down and wept. Sweet Thames, run softly till I end my song. Sweet Thames, run softly, for I speak not loud or long, but at my back in a cold blast I hear the rattle of the bones and chuckle spread from ear to ear. The line, Sweet Thames, run softly till I end my song, is from Spenser's Proletarian, and it alludes to a marriage song. In Spenser's work, water represents a joyous occasion, which is at odds with its usage in Eliot's Wasteland. Here the water once more represents the loss of life, although there is a sign of human living, indicating the possibility of rebirth. There are no humans around. The reference to nymph could be a calling back to the overarching idea of sex. Stanza 2. A rat crept softly through the vegetation, dragging its slimy belly on the bank while I was fishing in the dull canal. On a winter evening, round behind the gas house, musing upon the king, my brother's wreck, and on the king, My father's death before him, 5 bodies naked on the low damp ground, and bones cast in a little blow-dry garret, rattled by the rat's foot only, ear to ear, but at my back from time to time I hear the sound of horns and motors which shall bring Swaney to Mrs. Porter in the spring. Oh, the moon shone bright on Mrs. Porter and on her daughter. They washed their feet in soda water. It was sis Voixty and fans, chantinant, dance left, couple. There is no reason given, ultimately, for the wreckage of the Wasteland. However, following the idea of a Fisher King, we can assume that as the narrator suffers, so too does the world. The world, with the loss of culture, is now a barren wasteland, and with the onset of wars, has only served to become even more ruined and destroyed. Swaney and Mrs. Porter in the spring is a reference to the legend of Diana, the hunting goddess, and Acton. Acton spied on Diana in the bath, and Diana cursed him to become a stag, who was torn to pieces by his own hounds. Here Eliot again presents the destruction caused by loveless but lustful sexual relationships. Eto says, voids the infants, chanted and dance, la couple, and oh, these children voices singing in the dome is French and from Valrail's Parsifal about the noble virgin knight Percival, who can drink from the Holy Grail. Arthurian legend, due to his purity, it stands in this poem as a criticism of contemporaneous debased sexuality. Stanza 3. Twit, 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 chuck, 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 chuck. So rudely forced, Tedu, unreal city, under the brown fog of a winter noon. Mr. Huguenots, the Smyrna merchant, unshaven with a pocket full of currants, CIF London, documents at sight, asked me in a demotic French to luncheon at the Cannon Street Hotel, followed by a weekend at the Metropole. Mr. Huguenots has a dual meaning here, trying back to the merchant in Madame Sosostris tarot cards, as well as standing in for the behavior of Celestine gay men for affection. Cannon Suite Hotel and the Metropole were well known for this sort of behavior among homosexual men, and thus, once more, Eliot paints the cheapest possible side of love. Stanza 4. At the Violet Tower, when the eyes and back turn upward from the desk where the human engine waits, like a taxi throbbing waiting. At terraces, though blind, throbbing between two lives. Old man with wrinkled female breasts can see at the violet hour the evening hour that strives homeward and brings the sailor home from sea. The typist home at tea time clears her breakfast, lights her stove, and lays out food in tins out of the window perilously spread. Her dying combinations, touched by the sun's last rays, on the divan are piled. At night her bed, stockings, slippers, camisoles and stays. At terraces, old man with wrinkled tugs perceived the scene and foretold the rest. I too awaited the expected guest. He, the young man, carbuncular, arrives, a small house agent's clerk, with one bold stare, one of the low on whom assurance sits, as a silk hat on a Bradford millionaire. The time is now propitious, as he guesses. The meal is ended, she is bored and tired, endeavors to engage her in caresses, which still are unreproved if undesired. flushed and decided he assaults at once. Exploring, hands encounter no defense. His vanity requires no response and makes a welcome of indifference. And I, Tyruses, have force suffered all, enacted on the same divan on her bed. I who have sat by Thebes below the wall, and walked among the lowest of the dead, bestows one final patronizing kiss, and gropes his way, finding the stairs unlit. Tiresias is from Greek mythology, and he was turned into a woman as a punishment by Hera for separating two copulating snakes. In this poem, it serves again as a symbol of the cheapness of sex and affection. The scene that plays out illustrates Eliot's idea about the death of higher beliefs, such as the idea of romance and love. Note the lack of intimacy evidenced in the description above. Stanza 5. She turns and looks a moment in the glass, hardly aware of her departed lover. Her brain allows one half-formed thought to pass. Well, now that's done, and I'm glad it's over. When lovely woman stoops to folly and paces about her room again, alone, she smooths her hair with automatic hand and puts a record on the gramophone. The poet again refers to Shakespeare's Tempest. The stanza portrays a woman after a sexual encounter, likely with the speaker. She is depicted as emotionally detached, barely acknowledging her lover and thinking only of the encounter being over. Her actions of smoothing her hair and putting on a record highlight a focus on appearances and a desire to turn to normalcy. The woman pacing her room alone emphasizes her loneliness and lack of genuine connection. The line, when lovely woman stoops to folly, alludes a sense of regret or feeling that she has compromised her value. Overall, this stanza conveys a sense of emptiness and disillusionment in the aftermath of a sexual encounter, reflecting the broad themes of alienation and isolation in the poem. Stanza 6. Thus music crept by me upon the waters, and along the strand, up Queen Victoria Street. O city, city, I can sometimes hear, beside a public bar in Lower Thames Street, the pleasant winning of a mandolin, and a clatter and a chatter from within, where fishermen lounge at noon, where the walls of Magnus Martyr hold inexplicable splendor of Ionian white and gold. The river sweats oil and tar, the barges drift with the turning tide. Red sails wide to leeward swing on the heavy spar. The barges wash drifting logs down Greenwich Reach, past the Isles of Dogs. Vailala, Leah, Valala, Leah. Elizabeth and Leicester, beaten gores, the stern was formed a gilded shell, red and gold, the brisk swell rippled both shores. Southwest wind carried downstream the pearl of bells, white towers, Vailala Leah, Valala Leala. The opening line, the music crept by me upon the waters, is a direct reference to Shakespeare's play The Tempest. In the play, Ferdinand hears this music after believing his father has drowned, and it serves to soothe his grief. Eliot contrasts the bustling urban environment of London, Strand, Queen Victoria Street, Lower Thames Street, with the calming natural imagery of water and music. This contrast highlights the fragmented and alienated nature of modern life. Even within the desolation of the city, Eliot finds moments of beauty such as the pleasant whining of a mandolin and the inexplicable splendor of Ionian white and gold in the church of Magnus Martyr. These moments offer a glimmer of hope and transcendence amidst the despair. The allusion to the tempest and the speaker's longing for a more harmonious past contribute to the poem's overarching theme of memory and loss. The speaker is haunted by the past and struggles to find meaning in the present. The lines, "The river sweats oil and tar," vividly portrays the Thames River's polluted state, symbolizing the decay and degradation of modern society. The barges drifting with the tide of the mention of Greenwich Reach and Isles of Dogs paints a picture of London's industrial landscape. The drifting barges and the repetitive nonsensical chant Vailala, Leah and Vailala Leah convey a sense of aimlessness and a lack of meaningful connection. The polluted river contrasts with the traditional image of water as a source of life and purification, reflecting the spiritual emptiness of modern life. From the words Elizabeth and Leicester, it is clear that the poet is talking about the nobility or the royalty. The imagery of beating oars, gilded shell, and white towers creates a sense of grandeur and movement. Stanza 7. Trance and dusty trees, Hickbury bore me, Richmond and Kew. Undid me by Richmond, I raised my knees, supine on the floor of a narrow canoe. My feet are at Moorgate and my heart under my feet. After the event, he wept. He promised a new start. I made no comment. What should I resent? On Margaret Sands, I can connect nothing with nothing, the broken fingernails of dirty hands. My people humble, people who expect nothing. La 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 la. To Carthage then I came, burning, 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 burning. O Lord, thou pluckest me out. O Lord, thou pluckest burning. The poem in these lines seems to reflect on a relationship and its aftermath. The first stanza describes the speaker's experiences in different locations in London, contrasting the boredom of Hickbury with the emotional impact of Richmond and Kew. The image of lying in a canoe suggests a moment of vulnerability or surrender. Further lines reveals the speaker's emotional state. Heart under my feet and references an event that led to tears and promises of a fresh start from the other person. The speaker's lack of response and rhetorical question suggests a sense of detachment or resignation. On Margaret Lands refers to a location where the speaker is situated, likely a beach in Margaret, England, known for its desolation and emptiness. It sets a tone of isolation and despair. I can connect nothing with nothing. This reflects the speaker's inability to find meaning or connection in the world around them, a key theme of the poem. The broken fingernails of dirty hands. This imagery conveys a sense of poverty, hardship, and the struggles of the working class. My people, humble people who expect nothing. This line highlights the resignation and lack of hope among the people of the speaker observes. To Carthage then I came, burning, 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 burning. This section alludes to St. Augustine's Confessions, where Carthage symbolizes a place of spiritual and moral decay. The repetition of burning conveys intense suffering and purification. O Lord, thou pluckest me out, O Lord, thou pluckest. This is a plea for salvation and redemption from the desolation and despair that the speaker experiences. थैंक यू। आई होप आज की वीडियो आपको अच्छी लगी होगी। अगर अच्छी लगी तो लाइक शेयर एंड सब्सक्राइब टू माई चैनल। हमें कमेंट करके बताइए कि आप आने वाली वीडियोस किस टॉपिक पर देखना चाहते हैं। मिलते हैं कल इसके सेकंड पार्ट के साथ। थैंक यू।